John Dickson Batten, if you don't know of him, well, or rather I should say John Dickson Batten is somebody that you almost certainly won't know unless you've got the book of John Dickson Batten illustrations, which I edited, which came out a few months ago. These illustrations by John Dickson Batten were made in the 1890s. They were for a translation of the Inferno by one George Musgrave. They appeared in the translation when it was published in 1933, a year after the death of John Dickson Batten, a year after the death of George Musgrave. Since then, they've been hidden away. And the place where they've been hidden is Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford, because they've been left to Lady Margaret Hall by George Musgrave, who had them, had copyright of them, and had quite a large body of Dante material. All of that Dante material, including the drawings, were left to the college. For some decades, the drawings were displayed in one of the corridors, which came to be called Hell Passage. The drawings were then taken down, but the name stayed, and it's still Hell Passage. They are very fine drawings, which do, I'm certain, deserve to be seen by a wider public. When I say a wider public, I really mean a public of any sort whatsoever, because the drawings simply sat in a, first of all, in a cupboard, which is where they were when I first came to this college, and then in filing cabinets at the base of the library. So they are unknown. They should not be unknown, as I think you will appreciate if you go and take a look, which I do hope you will do if you haven't done so already. And with that little bit of blurb for John Dickson Batten, I'll pass over to Nick, who will conduct the poetry proceedings. Thank you.
Right. I'm Nick Haverley, and I'm the co-editor with Bernard O'Donoghue of the next book that we're launching here, and we're going to, and from which we're going to be reading. And you'll see me bobbing up and down every now and then to introduce the different readers and the different, and four of them on video actually as well. And first of all, then, before I give a bit of an introduction to the book, I'd like to just give space for our publisher, Angela Jarman of ARC Publications, to say a few words about the project. Angela.
Thank you, Nick. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. This is a very special occasion for ARC. It's the first time we will have come into contact with any of you, and we've been working on the book for, well, we published it in July, but before that we worked very intensely on it for about 3 months. We first heard about this project about 3 years ago when our translations editor, Jean Bowes-Byer, told us that she'd had a very interesting proposal from Nick to publish a new translation of Purgatorio, edited by him and Bernard O'Donoghue, to mark the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. And we thought it was interesting, but it never really we didn't come face to face with it until earlier this year. And then we realized that this was a very special project. It was something that, it was really a new venture for ARC. It was a much more academic book than our usual poetry books. We publish a lot of poetry in translation, but here was a completely different sort of translation with, I think, 16 translators, all Anglophone poets, but bringing a very different feel to the whole volume. There was an awful lot to do. It was a complicated layout. It was a very detailed manuscript, and we had to decide how to lay it out to make sense. And there was an awful lot to read, and we were rather daunted, but we buckled down. But I have to say we couldn't have done anything without Nick. He was absolutely pivotal in the project. He was, for a start, he presented us with a very clean manuscript. I imagine that he had been working very hard with all the translators for months, if not years. But, we had this beautifully clean manuscript. As we laid it out and as, various queries arose, we got in touch with Nick and he always replied promptly. Then the proofreading, I learnt huge amounts. I have to confess, I knew nothing really about Dante, and I really enjoyed the proofreading, but it took the best part of 2 weeks. It was a mammoth job. But, although this is one of the most complicated projects we've undertaken, it really is one of the books that we're most proud to have published. And, today brings everything together, and it's wonderful to meet many of the people who made the book what it is. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the kind words, Angela. And it was a pleasure to work with you, as I should be saying. Deo gratias, indeed, which is how some scribes end the copying of manuscripts of the Commedia. I mean, I could spend all of my allotted 5 minutes on giving thanks, and first of all to the publishers, the ARC publishers, Angela and Tony Ward, for accepting and producing the volume in such an elegant style. To also, Angela's mentioned the editor of the series, Professor Jean Bose-Beyer of UEA. She agreed to support the project on the very day we submitted the proposal, and continued to deal just as promptly with any ongoing questions. And for today's arrangements, more thanks more immediately for today's arrangement. We're hugely grateful to LMH for hosting us, to my friend and colleague, Pater Hainsworth, who is also a contributor to the volume, to the expert organizing team of Helena Beveridge and Aaron Woodley, to Torch, the Oxford Research Centre in the Humanities, for publicity about these Dante Festival events, and to the Oxford Dante Society and Richard Cooper for generously funding the drinks that will follow. Going back much further in time to the genesis of this project, this Poets in Purgatory, a project to present Dante through different poetic voices, has evolved over the opening decades of this millennium. It was perhaps first inspired by those 2001 South Bank readings of cantos from the Inferno, in which 3 of our present contributors, indeed, took part. One of these contributors, another very good friend and colleague, Bernard O'Donoghue, became closely involved at the start and has nurtured the whole project, not only at a sequence of reassuring editorial lunches, but also crucially by recruiting many of the crew of this Navicella dell'Ingegno. And it's that crew, the contributing poets, who deserve huge thanks for bringing us now into the harbour. 6 of them here in the front row you will hear reading in person today. Others have contributed by video. One of them, sadly, is not present in either form, but his work will be here. The poet and scholar Michael O'Neill began his contributions to Poets in Purgatory as early as 2008. And following his death in 2019, we decided to dedicate the whole volume, Legato con amore, as Dante puts it, to his memory. We'll be hearing some of his work later on. The poets have rendered this Purgatorio through a rich diversity, as Angela has pointed out, rich diversity of Anglophone voices, speaking from a variety of cultures and in a range of forms from blank verse to varieties of terza rima. As well as this complete translation in the book, we also included as a prelude a group of poems that reflect upon this second part of Dante's Commedia, and as a postscript we have included in the book translations of some lyrics by Dante, his predecessors and contemporaries. We're now going to sample some of this diversity, beginning with that prelude of poems called About Purgatorio. And the first of these is on video, and it's a reading of a poem by the New Zealand poet Jan Kemp.
At the beginning of this poem, I quote 2 lines from Dante Alighieri. I turned to the right and considered the other pole and saw 4 stars never seen except by the first people. The last word in the poem is the Maori word for love, aroha. Crux australis, te paki o Autahi, the Southern Cross. He never saw this kite of 4 stars, yet knew they existed. Heart map of home, our palm hemisphere, where we know where we are, upside down near the pole. Somehow he knew Eden is here, and we hand on the sunrise from Mount Ikarangi, a flaming kenna. And Dante, pilgrim, could have climbed up out of the shaft, plumb opposite Jerusalem, to stand ankle deep in the Pacific on a shoal near the Kermadec. Awestruck at seeing his cardinal virtues incarnate, white, on the milk near Centaurus. Justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. Rocks the gods had flung out of the backyard, making space to plant the herbs of faith, hope, and aroha.
2 items. First, his own poem, Il Tremoto, and then Michael O'Neill's poem, Detained. Jamie.
This is an image, the poem is from way back, about 20 years ago I wrote. It takes an image from Purgatory, Nick or Bernard would know, maybe 20 or 21 or 20. Dante uses this word tremoto, which corresponds to tremor, or in contemporary Italian terremoto, an earthquake. So I just playing off that. Il tremoto. Inside the mountain, earth begins to move its joints and spring the links that pegged it down, the fans of schist, the chocks and wedges of feldspar and chert. A daylight owl screws back from rock that spilling derelicts her nest, then quiet plugs the ear, a twist of wax. Behind the quiet, a core of silence hums until earth moves again, this time in earnest. Dumb, mattered dumb matter's rigid-tongued delirium, wrung at the verge of the crack that gapes at the heart of things, that widens the Norman watchtower from its sunken gateway to the parapet as the tide uncoils. This means in Purgatory, a soul pinned to the rock has broken free. More of that. Nick mentioned the dedication to my brother-in-law from Michael O'Neill, and my sister Posey has written a bit of a note about that, which I'd like to read. From the beginning of Michael's writing life, in his critical work, as well as in his poems, Dante was a constant figure of reference and renewal. So he was very pleased to be included in After Dante, and would, I'm sure, have been delighted by the book's dedication to him. I'll read Michael's poem. I'm impersonating myself, Michael, and Dante later. Anyway, Detained. Day after day, the sky a tempered blue that hardly changed in hue. You sat, trying to grasp the Purgatorio. The envious with eyelids sewn, their late errors forgiven, but not quite forgotten. The slothful racing ahead, soon out of sight. The discourse and the glimmerings of heaven, all these detained you from the summer's slow, accelerating slide towards oblivion. The swimmers and the water's undertow, the paunches and the tough resolves in tatters, the minor torments dealt by midge and mosquito. And too much sun, inertia over great matters, the rubbing sandal and the brand new blister, the hint of violence after silence shatters, the litany intoned each night of other, if also flawed, accounts of being. You erased them all, content to be there, where no rain, nor hail, nor snow, nor dew could fall, and where thought grew into a dream, whose substance has not vanished, as if belief survived, as if, in fact, it flourished.
Thanks, Jamie. And I do remember Michael mentioning when he first took on this translation task that it would be a good holiday project, and there were sort of echoes of holiday experiences in that. Our next reader is Bernard, my revered co-editor, Bernard O'Donoghue, who is going to read. We're now on to cantos from the Purgatorio, and Bernard is going to read part of Canto 2, the second half of Canto 2, in which Dante meets Casella. Bernard.
Well, what I have to say initially is very obvious, which is that I'm hugely grateful to Nick for overstating so much my involvement. I mean, I was a strongly encouraging presence at some of the meetings beforehand, but the work is all Nick's really, and it's been wonderful being in his hands. And we're of course extremely grateful to Ark for doing such an amazingly beautiful job with the book. I mean, it's staggering really. So that's the thanks. But my version is very plain style. In fact, it could be called blank verse, but it's somehow blanker than that, I think. But it's at the furthest remove from following the formalities of the original, like terza rima or anything else, really. The second, well, you know, I'm sure, but the second part of Canto 2 is when Dante and Virgil have still in the hands of Cato, have moved on, and they see the people being brought in, the newcomers to Purgatorio, by the angel. the newcomers are surprised to see Dante in particular, of course. The spirits who had spotted by my breathing that I was still alive were so astonished that they all turned pale. And just the way a crowd will gather to hear the latest news from a messenger carrying the olive branch, and no one cares if they trample on each other, so these spirits, blessed though they all were, jostled for a good view of my face, distracted from their path towards perfection. Then I saw one of them push right to the front to hug me with such particular affection that he inspired me to do the same to him. Ah, shadows with substance only on the surface. 3 times my arms closed up behind him and passed straight through him back onto my chest. I flushed, embarrassed, I suppose, and then this shadow pulled backwards with a smile, and I, following unsupported, nearly fell over. Gently, he told me I must take it easy, and then I knew who it was. I begged of him to pause a while there and to talk to me. He answered me, just as I liked you when I had a living body, freed of it I like you still. So yes, I'll pause. But you, where are you going? Dear Casella, when I've made this journey, I'll be returning back to where I live. But why have you been robbed of so much time? He said to me, no injustice has been done me if the angel who picks when and whom he pleases has chosen many times to leave me here. His action executes the will of justice. For 3 months, it is true, he's taken out without a protest whoever wants to go. I was facing the shore where the Tiber's water meets the sea and so turns salty, when I was with Mercy gathered in by him. He has flown just now directly to that harbour because that is where they all first assemble, those who are not condemned to sink to hell. I said to him, if this new disposition of things has not destroyed your memory or your gift, which used to satisfy every desire I had, please, will you comfort my poor soul with music? It's totally worn out with coming here, encumbered still with my whole earthly body. Love speaking with great yearning in my mind, he started then to sing, so very sweetly that the memory of it still echoes deep within me. My guide, myself, and all the people with us were so enchanted by it that the minds of all of us had room for nothing else. We were all taken up with concentration on his singing when Cato, inflexibly upright, shouted, "What are you doing, all you idle souls? What is all this negligence and hanging around? Hurry to the mountain to clean off the filth that stops you seeing the divine." And just like when doves, pecking at wheat or oats, utterly absorbed with their rich pasturing, calm without their usual flightiness, if something comes along that frightens them, with a sudden whoosh, they take off from their eating, distracted now by a more pressing concern. Likewise, I saw this newcome assembly leave the singing and turn toward the hillside, like people scattering off in all directions. And Virgil and I were as fast as anyone. My last observation is to say that I replaced my translation of the title of Amor nell'Emente with Nick's line from his translation, which comes at the end of the book. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernard. I think your line from Amor che nell'Emente mi ragione is better. Right. Our next contribution is via video, and it's Alicia Stallings, poet and translator, who lives in Greece but has connections with LMH. She translated for us both cantos 3 and 29, and her reading is going to be of the second half of Canto 3, where Dante encounters Manfred in the amongst the souls of the late repentant in Anti-Purgatory. Canto 3 than with Alicia Stallings.
Go.
I'm going to read a section from Canto 3. My name is Alicia Stallings, and Virgil and Dante have met a crowd of souls. O chosen souls, whose ends were good, said Virgil, by that peace sublime that waits you, as I've understood, tell us the way. How can we climb? Where is the mountain slope less steep? Who learns more or less abides lost time. And just as from the fold come sheep, first one, then two, then three, the flock stand meek and faces earthward keep, and if one walks, the rest will walk, and when he stops, huddle in place, meek, mild, not knowing why they balk. And so a few, with modest face, bellwethers of that happy crew, approached us at a solemn pace. When those in front could see, I threw a shadow rightward in its aim to the cliff, and rent the light in two. They hesitated as they came, and shrank back somewhat, and the rest, not knowing why, did just the same. No need to ask, for as you've guessed, a human body cleaves the light upon the ground, Virgil confessed. Trust me, don't wonder at the sight. He would not seek to scale this wall were he not backed by heaven's might. Then turn around, we heard them call to us, that worthy caravan, waving us back, and lead us all. Whoever you are, one soul began, turn back to face me as you go, and recognize me if you can. I turned and stared, handsome, just so, fair-haired, with noble aspect blessed, but one eyebrow split with a blow. Humbly, I could not attest to knowing him, and at my mild denial, he showed high on his breast a wound. I'm Manfred, and he smiled, grandson of Empress Constance. Please, when you go back, seek out my child, fair ancestress of Sicily's and Aragon's pride. See that she knows the truth, that when these injuries pierce my flesh with lethal blows, I gave myself to him, and cried, who always willing mercy shows, dire were my sins, and yet so wide, infinite goodness's embrace, that all who seek it fit inside.
On an island. We're working Jamie McKendrick, I'm afraid, quite hard today, and he's going to read now his own translation of the opening of Canto 8. Jamie.
Thanks, Nick. It was already the hour at which seafarers turned tenderly towards the vanished shore and the dear friends who bade them farewell. The hour the novice pilgrim feels heart-stricken to hear far off the rolling clang of bells that seem to mourn the day's decline. When my ears began to close their portals as I stared at one of the souls who had risen to call for quiet, had he something to tell? He joined together and lifted both his palms, but his eyes were on the east, as if to say, why should I care for any light but yours? So devotedly and with such sweet notes did Te lucis ante rise from his throat that I lost all sense of self and my senses reeled, while the others as sweetly and devotedly accompanied that soul through every verse, keeping their eyes fixed on the wheeling stars. Now, reader, sharpen your gaze, for here truth's covering is thin as gauze. So to pass beyond will ask for little force. I saw that silent, wan and august company stand fixing their eyes upon the sky, poised between hope and expectancy. And I saw two angels swooping downward, each brandished a flaming sword, its end blunted instead of being pointed. Their raiments, the green of bright new leaves, fanned by the wind of their green wings, rippled and fluted in folds behind their flight. One of the pair alighted just above us, the other opposite, so that effectively all the souls between them were protected. Their blonde hair could be clearly seen, but the eye recoiled from their countenance, confused by all that radiance. From the Virgin's lap they've made their descent, Sordello said, to guard this valley from the serpent, whose arrival's imminent. At that, not knowing whence it would appear, I looked all round and, chilled with fear, huddled close beside my trusted guide. Then, said Sordello, let's go down to the valley to speak with the great souls who will surely welcome you both with great acclaim. Thank you.
Our next reader, Angela Layton, translated cantos 9 to 11, 3 cantos in the collection. So she has translated canto 10 closely, but she preferred, and I like the idea of including at this point her poem, which actually appears in the prelude as a poem about Purgatorio, which is entitled Dante on Reflection, Canto 10, Purgatorio. Angela.
Thank you. I'm going to do what Jamie did and just pour some water. Right. This is the canto, you'll remember, in which Dante is oddly distracted and waylaid by beautiful artworks that he sees in the Purgatory, and particularly by a marble relief of the Annunciation. So in this poem, which starts off being a fairly close translation, but then moves away and becomes a kind of commentary, I'm trying to keep to the rhythm of the original. That's the 4 beats to a line. But I, unlike Alicia's wonderful terza rima, I let rhyme just happen when it can. I think I'm trying to bring out something modern in Dante here, and it's that weird surrealism in the landscape, as well as the element of comedy in the poem. But perhaps too a kind of sense of questioning that goes a little bit against the theological grain. Dante on reflection. So this is the way to go. However you summarize the sin, calibrate the soul, to follow a road to the ends of the world. That door clanged shut. Was I out or in? Over my shoulder Eurydice lapsed. Lot's wife was salted to an upright stack. But he and I pressed on through a chink, stone-walled, yet finding some permissive path that pitched and rolled under our feet. My dear poet warned me, now use your art, just dance, balance, dare to dream how a passage might carry you through and out. It was madness, I knew, sheer lunacy to think we could find our way in the waning moonlight, squeeze our shapes through the eye of a needle to clear this world and discover another. But we did, somehow, emerging elsewhere, on a plain, a blank, a flatness so sheer we stepped out blindly, trying to find our feet, dizzied by a ground that stretched to nowhere, lonely as hell, barren as a waste. And though it seemed endless, measureless to man, yet a mountain rose, and near where we sat, an edge gave suddenly onto nothingness.
I searched the fathomless scene all round, trying to map that country of the mind, its wild carousel of heights and depths. And that was when I saw, suddenly quite close, a cliff of white rising beside me. Impassable, it seemed, a marble sheet, but beautifully, finely carved in relief, finer than porcelain, sharper than light, than icicles shaped by nature overnight. And I traced an angel with the grace of a man announcing, "All hail," wings riffled with flight. The words in my ears from the hollow of his mouth matched my deepest heart's desire, as if the scaffold marble sliced sounds out of air. Was it memory's knife? And a Palombino whiteness met like breathlessness my outstretched hand. I could dream caress each dumbfound sense. In death's harsh land of pain and penitence, where sweating, wounded souls staggered up their helix track, sorry, flesh-bound shades, bound for the summit to be freed from themselves, I paused to follow the stone's allure, its speaking lines figuring a cry, ancient as story, rehearsed every day in wishing litanies, faithful prayers. And then I remembered my own heart, my own art's hoard of echoes gathered from ages before. The river from which no soul returns. 3 times that shade fled, fugitive as dream. My sweet poet nudged me. It was time to go, but I ducked, delayed, slunk round to stay gazing at that angel's momentous invitation, to sing death's Ninna Nanna to a child, while pierced with foresight any mother denies, she knelt to answer with heartbroken eyes. So something truer than right or wrong, than measured dues and heavenly rewards, gave me pause and held me dreaming where that marble effigy gentled the cliff face. How know art's know-how, its slow skill to feel, where else but elsewhere the dream's own place? I searched sin's calculus to discover art's grace.
Thank you, Angela. Wonderful parallel dream story. We now have 2 contributions on readings on video. The first of these is from the former Poet Laureate of Jamaica, Lorna Goodison. I first encountered Lorna at that South Bank reading of cantos from Inferno in 2001, when she gave a terrific rendering of what she called Mr. Brown. That was Brunetto Latini in Inferno 15. And I was, when we got this project going, I was really determined to try to get her to contribute, and so she did, very, very generously. And she has translated Canto 12, which is one of the cantos on the Circle of Pride, and this is a canto that begins with all those examples of overweening pride. And you'll see that that Lorna Goodison gives this kind of inflection of both Jamaican and, in at least one instance, West African culture.
Canto 12, Purgatorio. Evenly yoked like bull cows of the same size, the poor soul and me step in step side by side for as long as my good teacher allowed it. But when he said, "Forward up yourself and leave him," for like seamen who set out for the Keys, each must proceed by paddling their own canoe, I raised up myself and stand up to my full height, so that I could walk tall, dignified and upright, although my thoughts still did bend down low. I moved on and was following most obediently in my master's footsteps. We were already picking up pace when he checked me, said, "Lower your gaze in order to see your way clear. You need to sight up what is on this walkway where you are lifting up and putting down your feet." Just as how in some church floors tombs are inlaid underfoot, so the details of a life lived are engraved, never to be forgotten, always preserved. So a memorial to the departed remains to gaze on, when their dear ones go there, as pity brings tears on when the tender-hearted are pierced by memory. To one side I saw a depiction of that same one, he created more handsome than any star-born matinee idol, reeling down like lightning from the skies. On the other side I saw Iris, who scammed us, struck by a lightning bolt and lying down there comatose, cramped and cold upon the ground. I saw those Tim B, his pal, and Mars, gunmen all, bearing arms, gazing at the scattered body parts of their father Joe and other big-time gangsters. Nimrod I saw, demented under his mighty works, confused and dazed, looking in vain to his followers, spangled in bling and glitter in the land of Shinar. O Niobe, I see your eyes running with cold water. That is how I see you representing on that pathway betwixt your 7 and 7 dead picnic. And what a subject for lament you were, King Saul, stabbed by your own sword on top of Mount Gilboa, where neither rain nor dew water will hereafter fall. Oh, Trickify and Nancy, is just so I see you there, so, half a spider full of grief, unfriended on the threads of your mischief works spun on the web. O Rehoboam, now you can no longer be a menace to us with your hard face, for see a chariot racing to come haul away your overbearing statue. And seeing to on that stony path was the ultimate highest price Alcee made his own mother pay after she betrayed his father for jewelry. And there also I beheld a sequence of Sennacherib being shut up in the temple by the young assassins he trained, who then exited and left him for dead. It showed the troubles, the endless cycle of violence, strife, and riots that Miss T set off when she opened up her mouth and bragged to Master Cyrus, "Oh, his blood you want? Well, his blood I will full you up of." It showed how the Assyrian ran like bolt from the rout after Holofernes' death. And in the graphic images we saw the corpse of the slaughtered Don himself. I saw Troy, the city once green, it fell to ashes, ruins. O ill-clad man, how you were pictured in those scenes, reduced, reduced, reduced. What skilled master artist did light and shade that chiaroscuro? Those features, who was it made them appear so impressive, the bona fide art lovers? Take it as I tell you, the dead look dead for true. The ones supposed to be alive look like me and you. Any eyewitness to those events as they happened could not see any more than me when I beheld the scenes upon that pavement. So, exalt yourself. Go on, push out your chest, you children of Eve.
Don't bother to even look under your feet. Next thing you will go and see the evil path you're treading. So by now we passed further around the mountain, leaving more of the sun behind than I, who certainly was not paying much mind, had been taken notice of. When he who always walked in front on the lookout gave out, "Heads up! Do not be looking idly about. This is how you must proceed. Eyes forward, be attentive. See, an angel is now preparing to come this way. Behold how the sixth handmaiden of the day is coming back from service with all due respect. Get you ready, set yourself right, so the seraph will consent to be our guide as we take the upward path. Hold this thought. This day will never dawn again."
Second and last video contribution is from a very experienced translator of Dante, Steve Ellis, who recently completed, having translated Inferno in 1994, then has now completed the whole of the Commedia, and he allowed us to reproduce 4 of his cantos in the book. And here he is reading a canto of the Envious, Canto 14, the canto which explores the relations between the nobility in Tuscany and in the Romagna.
Who is it, rounding our mountain before death has flown him up, who can open and shut his eyes? I've no idea, but he's not alone. You're nearer to them. You ask, but do it nicely, so he'll speak. So 2 souls were talking of me, leant on each other on my right. Then raising their faces to speak, one said, "O soul bound for heaven, but still growing fixed in your flesh, for charity's sake please tell us who you are, where you're from. Your state of grace amazes us, as a thing never heard of must." And I, through middle Tuscany a stream uncoils from Falterona, 100+ miles in length. From beside it I bring this body. There's no point saying my name, since so far it's not much known. "If I can flesh out your meaning by my understanding," he replies, "it's the Arno you're referring to." The other asks, "Why did he hide the name of that river, like a man concealing something horrible?" And the soul who was asked this replies, "I don't know. It's good, though, this valley is blotted out, because from its head, in that part that's densest of the mountain chain that Pelorus was broken off from, to where it finally gets to restore what the sky absorbs from the sea, from where each river has its load, virtue is seen as an enemy, fled by all like a snake, by some curse on the place, or by bad practice. And their natures have so changed the people of that woeful valley, it's as if they have Circe as pastor. Among filthy pigs whose feeding should be acorns, not human food, it begins its miserable meanders. Coming down, it meets curs next, full of snarling, empty of power, and turns its snout away in scorn. It runs on down, and as it swells, that accursed and luckless ditch, it finds all the dogs become wolves, and then on through its deep gorges it meets such a set of crafty foxes, they don't fear any trap being set. I don't care that others hear me, and good for this man if he notes what a true spirit discloses to me. I see your grandson, now hunter of those wolves, terrorizing them on the bank of that bloody river. He sells their flesh as it still lives, then butchers them like old meat, annulling life and his own honour. In blood he exits that dire wood, left so that in 1,000 years it'll never recede the same. Like people hearing awful news, show woeful faces as they listen, wherever the threats come from. So I saw the other soul, attentive, getting disturbed and distressed as he grasped what was spoken. The words of one, the other's look, made me eager for their names, so I asked, pleading with them. The one who'd first spoke to me began, "You want me to behave to you as you wouldn't do to me, but since God wants to use you as such a showcase for his grace, I agree. So I was Guido del Duca. My blood burned so with envy that if I saw anyone's happiness, you'd see my face getting vivid. I reap straw from such seed here. O human race, setting your heart where brotherhood is excluded. This is Rinier, prize and honour of the house of Calbally, but now no one is the heir of his valour, and not only is his blood shorn of the good and graces of living, from shore to shore, from the Po to the mountains, is a wasteland of poisonous twigs, so too late it is now for any garden to grow. Where's good Lizio, Harry Mainardi, Pier Traversaro, Guido di Carpigna? O Romanesi, all degenerates now. In Bologna, where's Fabro's line? Or Bernardine di Fosco's in Faenza, noble offshoot of a modest stem? Don't be amazed, Tuscan, if I cry, recalling men like Guido da Prata, or Ugolino Dazzo, one of ours, Federico Tignoso and his circle, the Traversara and Anastaghi family, both of them with no successors, knights, ladies, and all the deeds sparked by our love and courtesy, where now all hearts are brutish. Oh, Bertinara, why not vanish away, since your family's one of many to die out, to avoid contamination? Bagnacaval does well not to breed, and bad Castrocaro, worse Conio, spawning such a problem brood. The Pagani should call a halt too, after that devil dies, even though their reputation is gone for good. Oh, Ugolin de Fantolin, you're okay, since no more are expected now to darken or to derail your line. But go now, Tuscan. All I desire is to weep rather than say more. Our talk has made me so glum.
We are now moving into the later cantos of the poem, and Michael O'Neill, the late Michael O'Neill, to whom the volume is dedicated, translated cantos 21 and 22, as well as part of canto 28. And I thought that we would not read it aloud, but we've just put on screen a few lines from it, and we could just observe a brief silence while we look at them. Thank you. And I should just point out also that that phrase, the soul's free to change its chamber, is also the phrase that is attached to the dedication to Michael O'Neill at the beginning of the volume. We now have another short message from another contributor, which will be displayed on the screen, from Andrew Fitzsimmons, who is working in Japan and has a big new volume of haiku translations coming out. And he translated 3 cantos, 23 to 25, and he quotes here from the beginning of Canto 23. And we now move to 2 readers to round off the cantos from the Purgatorio. Jane Draycott, who was already a very distinguished translator of, amongst other things, the Middle English poem Pearl, has translated for us cantos 30 and 31, which, like Pearl, is another encounter, a difficult encounter in a paradise garden. And she's going to read a couple of passages from cantos 30 and 31. Jane.
So yes, I couldn't have been more pleased. Thank you, Nick and Bernard, for the suggestion that I might translate cantos 30 and 31. In a way, it has been something of a pilgrimage for me to the wellspring of, visiting the wellspring of those passages I know so well from Pearl, written, less than a century later. So I'm going to read 2 passages, one from each canto, brief passages, which for me felt particularly reminiscent of similar echoing moments in the Pearl poem. There are 2 moments where Dante stands stilled and dazed by the beautiful and then reprimanding, scolding presence of Beatrice. So the moment in Canto 30, I'll read, when he first sees her again, after what he describes as so long ago. He sees her in the visionary procession across the water. And then I'll read the opening of Canto 31, in which Beatrice confronts Dante directly over his having fallen so easily for earthly pleasures. I have seen at the beginning of the day the eastern sky a haze of rosy red, while all the rest serene and cloudless lies, and how the sun's face rising through the air is shadowy and veiled, and how the mist allows the eye to rest and linger there. So, in the same way, behind that cloud of flowers which blossomed from the angel's hands and fell below them in the chariot and around, the figure of a woman appeared to me, her dress like a live flame beneath her cloak of green, her white veil wreathed in olive leaves. And at that moment, although so much time had passed since when I last stood trembling in her presence, dazed and overcome, even without looking at her now, my spirit felt the fire of that first love, touched to the core by her hidden power. And this is Beatrice really winding up now. This is the beginning of Canto 31. Without a trace of hesitation on her lips, Beatrice continued, turning the sword edge of her speech full force towards its tip. Let's hear your thoughts from there across the river. Tell the truth, gain pardon facing such a charge you must confess. I stood confused, all force drained out. I strained to speak. My words were spent before they left my throat. She waited just a moment, then asked, "So, is it not the case? The water hasn't yet erased your darkest memories from you." Fear and panic together drove my faint reply. A yes, so quiet on my lips as to be audible only with the eyes.
It's appropriate that we end the cantos. We'll be including also a couple of lyrics to at the very short lyrics at the very end. But we're ending the sequence of cantos with Patrick Worsnip's translation of Canto 33 into full terza rima, and it's very pleasing to report that that canto was described as admirable in the TLS just recently. Patrick.
Well, good evening, and thank you for being here. We're running a bit short of time, so I will try to restrict my introductory remarks to the minimum. As Nick said, I've attempted to do this canto into terza rima, and I think Dante devised this rhyme scheme to try to make the narrative sort of addictive to the reader. You just have to read on. Well, I found it addictive as a translator, and I initially intended just to do a few tercets and then maybe a canto or two, and I ended up 3 cantos short of the end of Paradiso. In this closing section to the Purgatorio, most of the canto is taken up by a diatribe by Beatrice, in which she expounds an ominous pageant which has taken place in the previous canto. And this is followed by a diatribe, not the first in the comedy and not the last either, against the corruption of the church, and predicts divine vengeance to come. Having finished that, she then instructs Matilda, who is, for want of a better word, a sort of nymph who lives in the earthly paradise, and who is referred to as the lovely woman in Dante's text. She instructs Matilda to take Dante and the soul of Statius, a 1st century AD Roman poet who has managed to wangle himself a place in Purgatory, to take them to the river Eunoe, which restores the memory of good actions. We recall that both Dante and Statius had previously been in the river Lethe, which wipes out the memory of sin. I think there are times when some of us could do with rivers like that. Anyway, with slower steps and with a brighter sheen, the sun was hugging the meridian ring, which varies by the point from which it's seen, when, as an escort who's accompanying a group walking before them, often will stop if he finds a trace of some strange thing. Just so the 7 women here stopped still near thin shade, like mountains cast, under trees' green leaves and black boughs on an icy rill. In front, I thought I saw the Euphrates and Tigris issue from one origin, then flow off like friends parting ill at ease. You light and glory of all people in the world, what are these waterways that well up here, then split from where they both begin? The answer to my question was, "To tell you that, request Matilda to reply." As though she had some censure to dispel, the lovely woman said, "He has had my account of this and much else. I've no doubt that Lethe's water did not veil his eye." Beatrice said, "Perhaps thinking about more pressing things which are well known for slowing the memory blocked his mental vision out. But see you, Noe, over there it's flowing. Lead him to it, and then, as is your use, contrive to get his failing powers going. Like noble souls which offer no excuse, but take their plan from what another planned as soon as outward signs have set it loose. The moment she had taken me in hand, the lovely woman moved and said to Statius, 'Come with him,' in a womanly command. Reader, if my manuscript were more capacious to write on, I'd describe, if not in full, that nectarous draught that left me still voracious. But as it is, this second canticle has run through all the pages designated. Art's bridle, then, makes that impossible. I made my way back feeling renovated from that most holy stream, as new plants rise, green with new shoots, and reinvigorated, pure and prepared to scale the star-filled skies. Thank you.
We've nearly run through all the pages designated now. We're just going to close with a couple of lyrics from the postscript to the volume. This contains lyrics by predecessors and contemporaries of Dante, and the first of these is someone whom Dante regarded as a great predecessor, the Occitan poet Arnaud Daniel, and Peter's going to read his one of Arnaud Daniel's poems, the poems by Il Miglior Fabio.
Arnaud Daniel was a poet that Dante much admired and imitated, and one of the things he imitated was the sestina by Arnaud Daniel. The sestina is a form that Arnaud Daniel invented. He wrote one. The second sestina ever to have been written was written by Dante, and it was following the model of Arnaud's sestina. If you don't know what a sestina is, very, very quickly, a sestina is a poem of 36 lines, basically. It's got 6 stanzas, and instead of rhymes, it has at the end of each line a particular word, which is then repeated throughout the poem. So there are 6 words, corresponding to the 6 lines of the poem, which come in the order, let's say, A, B, C, D, E, F. Stanza 2, you start at the end. So you go F, then A, then next to the end, then next to the beginning, third from the end, third from the beginning, right? So you permute them in that way, and then you start again in the next stanza. By the time you get to the end of this, you've done all possible combinations of these 6 words. The 6 words stay the same. Then, to conclude the whole business, you have 3 lines forming a kind of envoi in which all 6 words reappear in 3 lines. So it's a virtuoso thing, and you can see why Dante called, or had Guinizelli call Arnaud Daniel the better smith, il miglior fabbro del parlar materno, which was a line that was taken up by T.S. Eliot, as you may know, or probably know, in The Wasteland, and applied to Ezra Pound. So what Dante was enjoying, I think, was the virtuosity, and, well, I've kept the six words, the ones up there, throughout the poem. I've had to face some more difficulties, though, than Arnaud Daniel, because he had some words that had 2 meanings. So the word that was soul is also in Provençal arms, that is to put arms on somebody, to wear armour. So I somehow had to fiddle around with that. I will read out my version of this, which may have its strains, but one of the strains, I should say, is there in the original, and that is, you will hear at a certain moment the uncle be designated, appearing with the phrase, the sister of my uncle, who will be his mother. And clearly this is a particularly forced way of doing it, which I think Arnaut Daniel enjoyed. And I think Dante then enjoyed it too. So here we are, 39 lines altogether. And it's an erotic poem, a love poem. Arnaut Daniel was very much a love poem, a sensual love poet. Dante uses this form in his own most sensual love poems, non-Beatrice poems, poems about a stony woman, Donna Petrosa. Anyway, this is from the Provençal. My heart's let a fixed fancy enter, that beak cannot tear out of me, nor nail of meddler with vile tongue arming his soul. Since I can't risk hitting with branch or stick, at least by stealth, there where I have no uncle, shall I enjoy love's joy in bower or chamber. When I call back to mind the chamber, where to my cost I know no man can enter, all treat me worse than brother could or uncle. I've no limb, not a shake, no, not a nail, more than a child who has to face the stick. So scared am I, she too much owns my soul. Her body take me, not her soul, and cunningly conceal me in her chamber. It hurts my heart more than blows from a stick, that where she is, her servant cannot enter. I'll always be to her as flesh to nail, indifferent to reproof for friend or uncle. Even the sister of my uncle I did not love so much by this my soul. As close to her as finger to its nail, if she agreed, I'd be within her chamber. Love twists me since my heart has let it enter, more than a strong man playing with a thin stick. Since flower bloomed first on a dry stick, and from Sir Adam nephew came, or uncle, a love as fine as that my heart feels enter was not, I think, in body nor in soul. Whether she goes about or stays in chamber, my heart stays closer to her than a nail. My heart thus fits and clamps its nail to her more tightly than bark to a stick. She is joy's tower, its palace and its chamber. I love her more than cousin of mine or uncle, and paradise will doubly joy my soul if there by fine love ever man may enter. Arnaut dispatches song of nail and uncle to please her with the stick that arms his soul, his désiré by merit entering chamber. Thank you.
And to conclude with a very short item, Dante's, and from a contemporary of Dante's, of course Arno was a predecessor, Dante's friend Cino da Pistoia, around 1270s, 1336, outlived Dante and does not appear in Purgatorio, but he was a poet in the new style, and he exchanged sonnets with Dante. And on Dante's death in 1321, Cino wrote a commemorative canzone entitled Su per la costa amor dell'alto monte. This begins by imagining the climb up the mountain of Parnassus and the Muses' spring on Helicon, but then with the mention of Beatrice, it also recalls the ascent of Mount Purgatory and the ascent into paradise. Up there, love, on the crags of that high peak, using the skill and style of poet's speech, who still can climb now that the wings of genius lie broken? I know well that the waters have run dry within the spring, where all who gaze might see their flaws exposed if they looked carefully upon that glass. O just, true God, who pardons graciously all those who reach repentance at the end, take this keen soul, who throughout his whole life tended the plant of love, to Beatrice's arms. at last.